If you could please take your seats. We have a live link to Australia. So we need, just to keep the technology working, we need some quiet and hush in order to make this work. So if you could bear with us and the technology. Bruce, I'm going to give you your introduction, so bear with me.
Okay.
I won't try the Australian accent, but yeah, so our topic is attract the right customers to your door on autopilot. Our speaker is zooming in from Australia is Bruce Poling, otherwise known as the Joinery Coach. So just to draw your attention to that, within your pack you have a workbook, and there may be some opportunities for Bruce. He's going to take you through some of the book, so useful to get that at hand. So let me give you a little bit of background as you reach for that on Bruce. After working as a cabinet maker for many years, Bruce discovered his passion was for business, like many of you, and went out on his own and started his own very successful joinery business. He sold that business in 2002 after the realization that he had effectively reached burnout and had lost his passion as a result. And therefore, like many people, he had a turning point, a pivot, which went on to be his best learning experience. And that was, he found his real passion and purpose in life was helping joinery owners create success that they wanted, just like others had done for him. So in 2009, he launched himself as a results-driven, people-focused business coach. And on the basis, he really discovered that at the heart of all success in business was people. And he uses both his formal education and his hands-on life experience within the industry to give inspiration and information and guidance to companies in the industry that helps them achieve staggering results. His emphasis is on people and culture first, and has a program that guides people effectively through a new apprenticeship, but this time in business. He's helped hundreds of companies create the life that they want through programs such as his Joinery GPS and his Wealthy Joiner programs. And his goal now is to help as many business people around the world to create lifestyle and wealth, and at the same time have some fun along the way. Mr. Bruce Poling, will you please put your hands together for Bruce? The stage is yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, Sean. First of all, everybody can hear me okay? Everything's working fine?
Yeah,
good. Very good. Wonderful introduction, Sean. I've never actually heard somebody else tell that as well as you have, so congratulations. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint you a little bit because I'm coming to you from Australia, but I actually have a Canadian accent, so it's a little bit of a mix of things. So I might confuse you a little bit, but I'll just start out by thanking Fergal and Claire for the opportunity to be a part of this. Obviously, you've got some really high quality speakers at this event, so I'm really quite humbled to be a part of it. And you know, if I can help you in some way, that's just a huge bonus for me more than anything. So Sean, I'll just use you as a bit of a help here. You know, if we get a thumbs up or a head nod, please let me know. All good? Thumbs up? Excellent. So yeah, like Sean said, I run a small joinery coaching business, and we help joinery businesses primarily. Really what we're looking for is to help people get the wealth and the profits and all that sort of good stuff that you wanted when you first started your business. Most of our programs are built around 6 foundations, and what we've discovered is every business, joinery business, regardless of what it is, really they're founded on 6 foundations. So all our programs essentially hover around all of these foundations. Today, I'm going to sort of touch on one little point, which is around sales and marketing. We kind of worked long and hard to come up with something that we thought would be of great value to you today that was a little bit different from what everybody else is talking about. So, and it's a huge challenge for me to only talk for 20 minutes. I was talking to my wife a little while ago, and she said, "You're only going to talk for 20 minutes?" It's a big joke, right? Because usually most of these things go for a couple of hours. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to talk relatively fast. I'm going to have this sort of an odd Aussie Canadian accent, and we're going to get through a heap of stuff. My goal today really is one thing. It's to have you leave here with at least one little nugget of gold that you can use in your business today that will make an impact, hopefully a very large impact. Is that all right with everyone?
Yep.
All good? Yep. Thumbs up? Okay. So I'm assuming that everybody in the room is essentially a joinery business owner or working in the joinery industry to some extent. Would that be true?
Yep.
Okay.
We're in manufacturing, yep.
Okay, so we'll just jump right into this. I'll just ask a quick question. How many people, by a show of hands, how many people in the room have a creative mind, and how many people have a technical mind? First of all, how many people would say that you have a creative mind? Hands, show of hands.
More than 50%, yeah.
All right, so technical minded people, put your hands up. Excellent. So obviously the remainder, yeah. So close to a split, would you say, Sean?
What their mind is at.
Excellent. Usually at this point I tell a joke, but I don't know you well enough, and I'm kind of on the verge of maybe I do and maybe I don't. I'll just tell a quick joke. An Irishman walks into a pub. No, sorry, an Irishman walks out of a pub. Oh, hang on, that'll never happen. What would you say, Sean? 50-50?
I'd say stick to the joinery business.
Okay, one more little thing. Put your right hand on the shoulder to the right of you. Look that person in the eye and say to him or her. Say to him or her, oh crap, he's interactive. All right. There's really only three things that you need to do as a business owner in joinery businesses. You need to attract people to you. You need to attract the right customers. You need to convert those people into paying customers, and you need to deliver the product. Everybody would say that that's a fair statement. Pretty simple, isn't it? Attract people to you, convert them into paying customers, and deliver. Here's something that I've observed. We're really great at delivering. We make wonderful stuff, don't we? We love building stuff. If you're like me, I'm a cabinet maker at heart when you get right down to it. And being in the workshop for me is almost like therapy. You know, that's where I love being. And it's been a little bit of a journey for me to learn how to convert paying customers at the price that I actually want to get for my stuff. So you know, there's a psychology involved here, and this is actually a learning curve that a lot of us have to go through, because you know, really, this is where we love being, right? Would everybody agree with that you're more comfortable in the workshop or the factory than you are in front of a customer trying to get them paid into a paying customer? Show of hands, who would agree with that? Very reluctantly, most people put their hand up. Because when we start talking about marketing, this is usually what happens. If I was to ask everyone to write an article about their favorite thing they do in business, most people kind of freak out a little bit. And that's, as tradespeople, this is sort of how we're conditioned. We're conditioned to talk about our stuff, and primarily we get, you know, a potential customer in front of us, and we just basically say, I've got this great stuff, why don't you just buy it? You know, and that tends to be where we limit out a whole lot in our vocabulary, you know, because we've never really been trained in marketing, and let alone running a business. You know, we do great in the trade work, but running the business is hard. So what tends to happen that we've observed is that we tend to say, well, we're just going to sell to everyone. You know, if we ask you, who's your perfect customer? Everybody says, well, I just sell to everyone, right? Everybody's my perfect customer. So what tends to happen is we sort of throw this big net out there and say, I'm just going to try and get anyone to buy my stuff, because we're not really sure how to narrow down who our perfect customer is and attract them to us. And ultimately what happens is you end up reeling the net in, and there's a lot of what in the net? There's a lot of dead fish, a lot of wrong fish. There's also a lot of the right fish that you happen to be spending a whole ton of time going through this net and not really dealing with the right customers the right way. So you know, this is something that happens a lot. So, you know, at the end of the day, eventually you end up with either not enough work, or too much of the wrong work, or not enough profit, because, you know, you've agreed to a lower price when you didn't really want to. So there's some psychology to this, and we'll take you through a little bit of a framework as to how to start turning this around for yourself in business. Because wouldn't you rather be the big bear sitting at the top of the creek where the fish are just jumping into your mouth? Wouldn't that be better, where the fish are actually, you know, your clients are actually coming to you rather than you having to go out? It's the difference between hunting and attracting. There's a big difference. Or wouldn't it be better if you've actually got a queue of people lined up at your door waiting to come in and see you, and you can actually pick and choose, you know, yes, I'll work with you. No, I won't work with you. You know, that's really the ideal place in business. Wouldn't you agree? There's some people in that lineup you might prefer to work with, but maybe you shouldn't. So we're going to jump into some of the stuff we do really in our programs. This is all our premium program content. And we work on, essentially, there's 5 principles to this, and they're fairly basic principles, but more than anything, what I'm trying to do is give you a little bit of a framework to work around so that you can focus, you know, all your efforts in getting the right customers to your door. So the first thing we really want to do is, by show of hands, is there anybody, or how many of you in the audience could identify your perfect customer? Like if I was to ask you, can you write out a description of your perfect customer? How many people could do that?
Yeah, not many hands.
Not many hands. They've either gone to sleep or they're just not, they can't do it. So, and this is a bit of a problem, right? Because if you don't know who your ideal customer is, how would you ever attract them to you? And so that's really the first place you need to start. It kind of goes like this. You can't speak European. There isn't a language that is European, but if you wanted to attract someone from Germany, you need to learn German. Or if you get really clever, you could speak the East German dialect and really resonate with those people. So that's a bit of an example. It's often, it feels like a bit of a risk to niche and to target a client, but the results are staggering. So we work with people to try and find who your perfect client is. Hand in hand with that is there needs to be something that you're great at. Preferably your ideal client wants what you're great at. And, you know, a lot of the joinery businesses we look at, they're either great at doing finishing or polishing, or they're great with CNC, so they're great with technical work, and they can do some wonderful stuff with their CNC work. So when we can kind of identify what you're great at, then we can put that into a really great marketing strategy. So without the first 2 things in place, the marketing strategy is basically just casting a big net out there in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. After we've got our marketing strategy together, we can then work on what we're going to call a conversion strategy. And we're going to talk a little bit about conversion strategy today, because this is kind of where the magic happens. And my suggestion is if we commit to that strategy for 1 full year, in that narrower focus, your business will grow exponentially more than it has in previous years. Because this gives you a very, very narrow focus and a very specific and targeted way to get your business up to those next levels. So this is essentially how it looks when we put it into the half of the room that likes this, the technical minded. This is the technical stuff. And essentially there's a section here where attract and convert kind of overlap one another. Once we get your marketing strategy working, people are actually coming to you. There's a section sort of in here where you'll find that attract and convert sort of overlap each other. You've got people coming to you, but now there's actually a conversation taking place. So once we've got people attracted to you, you actually have to talk to them. There has to be some human connection made. And this is where I find a lot of people like me, when we were trying to convert an ideal customer into work, quite often it went bad because we just didn't really have the right words to say, or we didn't know how to steer that ship down the right road. And I've seen some staggering results of my clients in the last 6 months that we have put together a bit of a framework like you're seeing here. And the difference is, some of them are saying, look, for the last 10 years, I've had a different conversation with every single customer that I've dealt with. So if you have a different conversation every single time, your results are never going to be consistent in marketing. We've got to get what works for you into a conversion strategy and try and put it into a bit of a script for you to follow. Does that make sense?
Yep, nothing else.
That makes sense. So here's what typically happens. Now I'm limited in time here, but I'll do my best artistic rendition. You tell me how I'm going here, Sean.
You're doing good, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So here is Joe joining. And here is Sally customer. How's that look? That makes sense?
Not
Now,
sure what your joinery ends up looking like, but it's
not so sure. Now, where we're going with this is there are some things that go on inside people's heads. I'll give you a little bit of an example. My wife, the other day, she was walking out of a cafe. There were these glass sliding doors. And normally when you walk in front of a glass sliding door, there's usually a sensor above the door that sees that you're there and it opens the door for you, right? In this particular situation, the door wasn't opening and she walked back and forth in front of this door 2 or 3 times. The door wasn't opening. She walked back and towards the door again. Just the door wasn't opening. There was a guy sitting beside her that said, "Dear, you've got to actually touch the door and the door will open." What my wife didn't see is there was this big sign on the door that says "touch here" and the door will open. And it was right at eye level. But because she had this dialogue in her head that said to her, because she'd done it over and over and over again, the door will open when you stand there. She didn't even see the sign that was right in front of her. I'm sure everybody's had that sort of a situation happen to them where you go, "Wow, I didn't even see that." And that's what we're talking about. There's a dialogue that goes on in your head that presets how you react either to people or your surroundings. Now, I'll ask everybody to maybe yell out a couple of options. When you're when you're working in your business on a day-by-day basis, what are some of the things that go on in your head? Let's hear some thoughts.
If you want to try, what goes on in your head? What are those thoughts that you have?
What are the topics that you think about day by day when you're running your business?
Anyone ready to shout some out? Finance. Where's the money? Anyone else? Who is? Deadlines. How to meet deadlines. Pressure to meet deadlines.
Yeah.
Suppliers. What about suppliers?
Will we get them time?
When you get them on, when you get your products and raw materials in time.
Yeah. Okay. So you get where we're going with this, right? There is in your head, in your mind, on a day-by-day basis, hour by hour, minute by minute, we're conditioned to think certain things a certain way. And therefore, when we deal with our customers, that presets us to deal with our customers with those thoughts in our head. And the interesting thing is your customers are not thinking any of those things. So the challenge for us here is to try and change our approach to our customers and try and get rid of some of those thoughts out of our head. So there's a little bit of a thought process to this. And I'll just take a backward step here and I'll say, once you've got your marketing strategies working, and I'm willing to bet that you're all in business, so you're getting some money from somewhere, you're probably dealing with customers on some level, I would assume. So the question is, once you start dealing with these customers, how do you get them into either not dealing with them because they're not the right customer for you, or maybe we find that they're a great customer and we want to get them to pay your price? That's really the question here. What I think you find is that you're going to find that you're dealing with about 4 different kinds of people. Either a really good potential client, or someone who's a skeptic, someone who's a critic, or someone who's a fan. And one of the things we help people with is to recognize when you've got one of those 4 people in front of you. So skeptics are going to give you resistance. They're going to say things like, "Yes, but the problem with that is." Critics are going to say a very similar thing, right? Critics are going to give you doubt. If you say, "I can do that on time," they're going to say, "Well, I doubt it." You know, those types of things. You might even have some fans that, you know, if you have a website, you've got someone who's a great fan of yours. But the problem with fans is all they do is make excuses, right? "I love your work, but I'm just not ready right now." What you really want is you want clients that are going to give you money, right? That's really where we're trying to go with this. So there's two measurements. When someone really trusts you and they're really qualified, they're probably going to turn over money to you. But let's be honest, to get someone to pry money out of their hands to give it to you, they really have to trust you. And that's where we're sort of going is how do we get clients to trust us, and how qualified are they when they meet us? So that's a little bit of a breakdown of, 4 different types of people that you tend to talk to in a conversation. What I've created is I've created a fit or no fit framework, because not only have I observed this, but I've done this myself. And I can think back to the 20 odd years I was in business, and I dealt with people in virtually the same way every single time. I didn't have a way to convert them into a paying customer, or a way to say to them, look, I'm sorry, I just don't think we're the right fit for you. So what we do is we go through this framework, and essentially what we're saying is when you first meet them, ask some questions. And I've just given some examples here of what you could ask. So, when people first contact you, do you like them? Are they approachable? Do they take advice well? And it's interesting because I just had a conversation with a client today who has a client that they don't want to work for, and they don't know how to tell them, I don't want to work for you. I've got a really bad feeling about this, but they couldn't articulate what that bad feeling was. And then they couldn't transfer that into a conversation with the customer to say, I really don't want to do this work. It was just giving them a whole ball of stress. And so we took them through the fit, no fit framework, and we just said, just ask these questions. And if you get to a point where you can't go past this, the conversation really just ends up being something along the lines of, every job we do, we want to make sure we do it 100%, and we're just not certain we're going to be able to do this job to the level that you or I want. So we don't think we're a good fit. So there's a bit of a conversation that we can have around that. But let's assume we go to the next level, and you love the person in front of you, and they love you, and they're taking advice well, and they're asking you the questions. The next question is, why are they actually talking to you in the first place? This is gold. This is really good information for you to have. We're not talking about price at this stage. We're just asking questions. Why are they talking to you? And they might say things like, I've read your blog, or maybe you did a kitchen for my sister, or maybe you did a kitchen for my friend, or you built my brother a bookcase. That's gold information for you to have, because the statistics say that referral work is going to get you 25% more conversions, and you can charge 25% more for it as well. So once we know why they're talking to you, and you can start discovering what they actually want. And let's be really clear, nobody needs your stuff. Nobody needs a new kitchen. Hopefully they want a new kitchen. We want to get them to want what you have. But people need what? They need food, shelter. People are pretty clever. They know that they don't actually need this stuff. The challenge is to get them to want it, right? So we need to raise the value in the eyes of the customer. And that's what we're doing, is we're prying information out of the customer that's in front of you, to try and give you an ability to feed back to them. Sean, maybe we could get a show of hands here. Has anybody ever heard the saying, if you can articulate someone's problem better than they can, they will identify you as the expert to solve that problem? Has anybody ever heard that before?
Have you come across that? Hands up. Yeah, we have a few, for sure.
Yeah. And it works really, really well, because once we've got all this information and we can articulate how we would solve someone's problem and put it back to them, they then identify you as the expert. So what we've observed a lot is there is sort of a sweet spot when we're talking to people about price, because the question on the table here is, how do you get the price? Like, how many people in the room right now are frustrated because you feel like selling your product is all about price? You've got to always be the lowest bidder. How many people feel that as a frustration?
Any people feel that? Yeah, we've got a good show of hands here for price being an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the list of things that we got as feedback, right? Where everybody kind of said, we're just sick of always being, our price being pushed down. But here's the thing: is if you keep putting conversations on the table that are actually the value that the customer is talking about. Remember, we went back to forgetting about the things that are in your head. Listen to what the customer. So, for example, if we're installing a kitchen and we're doing a renovation, we find that one of the most important things to people is, how long is my life going to be disrupted while you're in my house? And so the sooner we put off talking about price, and we make sure that we've identified these things that your customer is feeding back to you as the most important things to them, that's when.
Just interesting. How much of that is coming from the fact that many people feel that they have to sell what they're doing rather than listen to identify the needs and the pain points to which they can then apply their solution that makes them the right fit, and then price becomes an issue. How important is that listening process?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've heard what it is that they've said, you can feed it back to them and make sure that they trust that you can solve these problems, because what you need to do really is increase your trust with the customer and increase your value, because as soon as your value goes up, your trust goes up. And then people that have said, well, the price wasn't an issue, are always people that have said they essentially put all my concerns to rest. And so really that's what you have to do. So if you're bringing up price before you've talked about any of these things, the customer will not put a high value on your service or your product anyway. You know, so these things that the customer is really saying that's feeding back to you, this is where the value is. So the challenge for everybody that has a technical or a trade background is to resist price, to resist talking about price until you've identified all of those things and brought them up in conversation. And that's really the challenge, because we want to just jump to, look, I've got great stuff. You're all probably, you know, great people, do great work. I've seen some of your work. It's fantastic. It's mind blowing. Why don't they just buy it without us having to go through all this stuff? I'm sorry, but the reality is they don't. Customers think very differently, and you know, to part with money, we all know it's difficult. So this is how we raise trust. We make sure that we're listening to our customers and then feeding that back to them. Has anybody ever heard the old saying that the last guy that puts the quote in usually wins the work? You know, if you get in first, you put your bid in, and the customer says 2 weeks later, I'm just waiting for one more quote, and that guy usually wins it. That's always had me very curious why that happens. And I think the reason that it happens is because the last guy has had the previous people talk about all these things in some way, shape, or form, and the customer is now aware that they want this and this and this and this, and that's the conversation that the last guy's had. And he put his price on the table, and the customer just said, okay, well, let's go ahead with it. So that conversation got fleshed out by the first 2 or 3 people bidding. So that's where we sort of say there's a sweet spot. And it really comes back to resisting bringing up price until you've actually identified all of these value bombs that the customer's throwing at you. Is that making sense?
Yeah, for sure. Lots of encouraging nods.
Because at the end of the day, you want them to say yes to your price, not their price. That's really what we're looking for. That's essentially what we're trying to do. And the fit or no fit framework is essentially a script that you can have. Now, I will apologize because some of this you won't have in your handout. If everybody wants to get a copy of this new version, let me know. I'll email it to you. Just drop me your email and we'll send it off to you. But what a lot of people are doing is they're having this in front of them whenever they're in contact with the customer, and they're just going through it. After a while, you sort of get to know it. The end result is we've seen people that are going from maybe a 20 or 30% conversion rate up to 70 or 80% conversion rates, because the customers are now going through this, and the ones that weren't ever going to buy, we're not dealing with it anymore anyway. They're just going sort of out the back door. So this is sort of where the magic happens, is the fit or no fit framework and having a script in front of you so that you can follow it through every time. This is what we call a conversion strategy.
We have about 2 minutes, Bruce.
So that's my little nugget of gold for you. Does anybody have any questions, John?
Great, let's see. Have we got some questions for Bruce? Mindful of information, knows the industry, and has the models. Any questions?
Price is less of an issue. We feel in a certain percentage you can get above for 5, 10, 15%.
Our question from one of our timber window manufacturers is about price. If you can get past this issue of price, how much more can you get beyond 5, 10, 15% beyond what you would normally get? Have you any experience of that level of getting that increase?
People line up overnight for an iPhone. Not a better phone. It's not worth any more than the other ones. But people will queue up overnight in the rain to get an iPhone. How well you do what you do is always dependent on how well you're aligning with your customer. Of course, there's a limit. You can't be 3 or 4 times more. But how much you get someone to want your stuff is really how well you do things. And Apple's done a pretty good job of things like that. They're selling stuff for more when it's not worth more. And, you know, when you implement your strategies, it really comes down to how well you hear what the customer is saying and clearly articulate back to them how well you're going to do it. You know, 20, 30% more is...
How well you know your customer, how great you are at what you do, and how you've marketed that to create the perception in the mind of the customer that they want it, and then price becomes less an issue.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a balancing act here. We've got to drive costs down so that your manufacturing is going to work for you. We've got to get efficiencies through your factory. We've got to get consistent sales through the door. There is an absolute balancing act when you're running a manufacturing business. This is one topic. It's not a minor topic. It's an important topic, but it's one of about 6 or 7 that we've got to make sure you've got in balance in your business so that it's consistent. Marketing strategies can be automated. So you bring your warm leads in, and then you're dealing with your warm leads as a customer and converting them to customers.
Let me see if we have one last final question, Bruce, before we wrap up. I've got another question. Yes.
In a bespoke business, how does the concept of charging for consultation and design work fit into this model?
So instead of just a product that is commoditized, if you're doing bespoke, how do you get paid for that consulting piece in the middle that is about consulting, designing, and making it bespoke? How do you get paid for that?
Value is something that we can define in a real simple way. If I was to ask everyone in the room, how would you define the word value? Can anybody come up with a definition really quickly?
Definition of value. What have we got at the back? What the customer is willing to pay for it.
Absolutely correct. Value is anything that somebody will pay money for. So it's actually really simple. If your consulting work in the middle of the framework is of value to your customer, they will pay for it. If it's not, you need to bury it in the cost and say that's part of the service. So it's how you present to your customer those things that are either value added or they're not value added. And if they're value added, you can use it to increase your price and your service. So it really comes down to if it's of value to your customer or not, then you should be able to charge for it.
Super. Bruce, thanks for that. Just to wrap up, can I extend a very warm congratulations and thank you for your input and your expertise. It's been fascinating talking to you. And I'm sure, I don't know, have you been to Ireland?
It's on my bucket list of the next country.
That's a long no. Yeah. Okay. So can I extend on behalf of the Irish people a welcome to you that you may come to Ireland and spend some of that money that you have over there in Australian dollars. We'd love to welcome you and hopefully we introduce you to the group in person when you're over next. So on behalf of thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks, guys. Have a great conference.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks.
Thank you.